Hello and welcome back. I hope you've all been doing well. I've finally finished reading Homo Deus. It's been a bit of a beast. It's a big old book and it is jam-packed full of information. But it's been a fascinating read and I've been meaning to do this video for a while now. I'm struggling to find a decent place to film today. So I'm just kind of walking around this empty bike park, just having a little stroll around while I make the video. And in fact, this video is going to be filmed in 3 separate parts, and I'm going to film each part in a different place. So this is part 1. Part 2 will probably be in a different place, and I'll be wearing a different shirt or something. And the same with part 3, but that's just how it is. So I'm breaking this video down into 3 sections. The book itself is broken down into 3 sections as well, but my 3 sections are different. I'm making my own 3 sections based on the way I'm kind of arranging the information in the book. So section 1 I'm going to call the 21st century, because that's how the book opens up. It starts off by talking about the 21st century, and the main point that the book makes in the opening chapters is that the big 3 problems that have always faced humanity are decreasing in the 21st century. And these 3 problems are famine, plague and war. Since the beginning of humanity, going all the way back to hunter-gatherer times, those 3 things have been the absolute bane of our existence. Famine, plague and war. We have always had to worry about where our next meal is coming from. We've always had to worry about starvation, and we've always had to worry about food. And that people have always gone hungry in the past. But nowadays, as long as you live in a developed country, you haven't really got to worry about food. And Yuval Noah Harari actually makes a very bold claim in the book. He says, in the 21st century, you're more likely to die from obesity than starvation. If you think about that, it's very true. Of course, it does depend on what part of the world you live in, but it's true to a certain extent. You're more likely to be obese than to starve. And plague is the next one. Apparently, in the 21st century, plague is decreasing, and of course, that's down to the advanced medicines that we're producing. And believe it or not, war is also on the decrease, on the decline. It may be hard to believe, considering the stuff that's going on in the Middle East and whatnot, but according to Yuval Noah Harari, war is on the decline in the 21st century. And he also makes quite another controversial claim on this topic. He actually says that in the 21st century, sugar is more deadly than gunpowder. That's brilliant. It might be hard to believe, but when you think about it, it probably is true. And that relates to obesity again. Sugar is more deadly than gunpowder. So that's how the book opens up. It discusses the big 3, and it makes the point that the big 3 is on the decline. So the book starts off on a very positive note, really. It starts off with a positive footnote, and it outlines these 3 points very well. But then, I'm referring to notes here, by the way, because there's so much to go through. It then goes on to name the 2 projects of the 21st century. There are 2 main projects that are going to happen in this century, and the first one is immortality, or human immortality to be more precise. And the second one is happiness, human happiness. The two big projects, everything that humanity is going to work towards in the 21st century is going to be about immortality and happiness. We're moving into the realm of gene editing. We're moving into the realm of biotechnology, nanotechnology, more advanced medicine. This is all geared towards trying to live forever. We've got cryonics, all of these things. It's all about human immortality, or at the very least extending the human lifespan to like at least twice what it is now. That's what it's all about. And it's also about human happiness. So we're constantly studying human psychology, we're constantly studying the brain, we're constantly trying to understand the human mind more. We're also constantly trying to improve the environment and build more houses. All of this advance in technology and understanding is all about human happiness. Alright, so that's another positive. We've got two positives there. The big three are decreasing, and the two big projects of the 21st century are about immortality and happiness. Now, I just mentioned the human brain there and what we know about the human brain. Another important point that's discussed in the opening chapters of the book is that despite the fact that we now know what the human brain looks like, and despite the fact that we've known for a long time what each part of the brain does and what all of these different sections do and how they work together, and despite the fact that we've got things like CT scans and fMRI scans and stuff like that, despite the fact that we know all about psychology and stuff, despite all of this stuff, we still don't understand consciousness. We still don't understand how we have it, why we've got it, or where it is. I think a famous scientist, I forget his name now, he said if you could shrink down to the size of an atom and then walk around the inside of a human brain and looking around at all the different sections, you wouldn't find consciousness. You'd see all of the different parts, and you'd see all of the different neural connections and stuff, but you wouldn't find something called consciousness. We can't see it. We don't know where it is. We can't pinpoint it. And another thing is we don't know why we've got it. This might seem strange, but we don't actually need consciousness. An organism, an animal, could survive without consciousness as long as it followed what its genes wanted it to do. As long as it ate food and as long as it reproduced, it wouldn't need to be conscious. And it's the same with human beings. We could survive without consciousness. So we don't really know why we've got it. Consciousness itself is still a big, massive mystery in the 21st century. And we seem to be a long way away from working it all out. The most popular theory that we have right now as to why we have consciousness is that it's actually a byproduct of all of the different sections of the brain working together. In the brain you've got so many neurons and so many synapses, all of these different connections, and you've got all this electrical activity all going on in this brain. So many connections and electrical impulses going on, and all of these sections of the brain working together. And the best that we can come up with is that consciousness is just a kind of byproduct of all of that activity. When all of that stuff is going on, the lights come on, we open our eyes, and we're just like aware of things. So as far as we know, consciousness is an accident, just like we are. Human beings are an accident. We evolved by accident, just as every other animal did on Earth. Life is an accident, so it kind of makes sense that consciousness too is an accident. That's the best theory we've got as of now. Also, at the beginning of the book, he kind of reiterates some points that he made in the book Sapiens, which I reviewed in another video. He talks about intersubjective realities. Let's just start by reminding ourselves of what objective and subjective means. An objective reality is something that is definitely real in the external world. So if you see a car parked on the street, that's an objective reality. Nobody can say that it doesn't exist, because you can touch it, you can see it, and somebody else can touch it and see it. You can get in it and drive it. It's an object and it exists. That's objective reality. Subjective reality is something that you experience on your own inside your head. So that, for example, you could have a headache. If you have a headache and you go to the doctor and he can't see the headache, but you know it's there because you can feel it, and let's say he gives you a brain scan, and after the brain scan he says, "I'm sorry, I can't see your headache." That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it means it's subjective. It means it's to do with your experience. So that's subjective and subjective. Intersubjective realities are subjective realities that we can all share. So that they exist in our heads, not in the external world, but we all believe in them and we can all see them. And the big ones are money, gods, countries and companies and corporations. It's quite an obvious point, but it deserves to be spoken of again. We get so used to these things in everyday life, we forget that they're not real. Money does not exist. Bits of paper aren't worth anything. Coins aren't worth anything. But they actually are worth things in our society because we all believe in them. But if everybody stopped believing in money, and if everyone just decided that money is just bits of paper, instantly it would be worthless. So money doesn't exist. Countries don't exist. Things like the EU don't exist. An example that's used in the book is the USSR. At some point in the late 80s or the 1990s, a group of officials got into a room, sat behind a desk, and they all decided that the USSR will no longer exist. A whole entire nation won't exist anymore. And they signed a few bits of paper, everybody made an agreement, and just like that, the USSR ceased to exist. So these things don't exist anyway. They only exist in our minds. They exist as intersubjective realities. Another one is companies. Microsoft doesn't exist. Google doesn't exist. If everybody got together today and decided that Google would no longer exist, signed a few contracts, it would cease to exist. If everybody got together and decided that America doesn't exist anymore, it wouldn't exist. These nations and countries don't exist. And he also says, he makes a point that the ancient Egyptian gods, for example, in ancient Egypt, you had gods that were cats or crocodiles and stuff. And these gods were very similar to brands like Google and Microsoft. He kind of compares them. He compares these corporations to ancient gods, because both had logos, both had symbols, both had certain information to put across, and both had countless people who believed in them. And they also had countless people who paid money to them. In ancient Egypt, people paid money to their gods. In modern day civilization today, people pay money to Google and Microsoft. So all of these things are intersubjective realities. Alright, so They're the main points that the book opens up with. And just one more thing as well, talking about empires. He makes a point that empires could only exist after we had writing and money. Before writing and money came along, there's no way that we could build an empire, because to build an empire you need to keep track of who owes money to who, and who owns which piece of land. You need to keep track of ownership and kind of financial issues, and the human brain is not capable of keeping track of thousands and millions of people. So empires could not exist until writing and money. So that sums up part one of this video. Okay, so we got the big three in decline, we've got the two projects of the 21st century, we've got the fact that we don't understand consciousness yet, we've got intersubjective realities, and we've got the rise of empires coinciding with writing and money. That is the start of Homo Deus. They're the big main points of the first section of the book. Most of them are quite positive, okay? Things will get slightly less positive in parts 2 and 3, okay? So let's move on to part 2. Up until around the 14th century, the world used to be a very religious place. Most people believed that everything that happened on Earth was due to some great cosmic plan orchestrated by some god up in the sky, or even orchestrated by the universe itself. Human beings were pretty much irrelevant up until the 14th century. They didn't matter very much. You could say human beings were just like pawns in some great game that was controlled by the universe, or controlled by this god or that god. But in the 14th century or thereabouts, there was a big shift, and a new religion came into being. And that new religion is, or was, humanism. I think it was linked to the Renaissance. After the Renaissance, human beings became a lot more important and a lot more relevant, and humanism came into play. And when that happened, there was a great shift in perception. All of a sudden, the power and the relevance went from the universe and God to humans. Human beings became a lot more powerful, and that shift was visible in a number of different things. All of a sudden you had something called voting, where humans could vote for their next leader or political party. That would never have happened before humanism, because humans were irrelevant. It didn't matter what we thought. We had kings or rulers who elected themselves, or they came into power just through birthright. But when humanism came along, all of a sudden we could vote. And another one is works of art. This is an interesting one. Before humanism, if an artist created a work of art, let's say a painting, sometimes the credit for that work of art wasn't even given to the artist. It was given to God or the universe. It was believed that God kind of channeled his creativity down through the artist, through the human being, and then the artist made the painting. So that the credit wasn't even given to the human being, it was given to somebody up in the sky. Or it might have been given to the universe. The universe channeled its energy through the human, and then the painting was made. But when humanism came along, the work of art was done by the human. So that was a big shift there. Relationships. Under humanism, people formed relationships because it made them feel good. It was something they wanted to do. Before humanism, people probably got married just to serve out God's plan or to serve out some grand scheme in the universe and to reproduce. You were just a pawn in the game, just a part of some grand major plan. Also, education became a big thing after humanism, and people became educated so that they could think for themselves and become this individual with all of this knowledge. It wasn't to serve out a grand plan orchestrated by somebody else. It was to pick up, it was so that person could become educated and enjoy the wisdom and live out a great life. Also, Yuval points out that this big shift is apparent in old stories and folk tales. If you think of some old stories from way back in the day, like in medieval times, they usually involve a knight in shining armour or something like that, and the whole story is about the knight slaying a dragon or killing some soldiers and going to rescue a princess. The story is all about actions, that the knight did this, the knight did that, the knight killed this warrior, and the knight killed this goblin and rescued the princess or whatever. It's all about actions. But nowadays, modern stories are all about emotions and feelings. It's not about the protagonist doing something, it's about the protagonist learning something or experiencing a shift, and you kind of follow the protagonist's feelings and emotions rather than his or her actions. And that's all because of humanism. Again, it's all about the human being being important and being relevant. Another great example that's pointed out in the book is war paintings, and just war in general. So before humanism, you had war paintings, but these paintings were all about that they depicted the war, or they depicted soldiers as being just tiny little ants serving in the war, or tiny little pawns. I'll show you some of the paintings that are pointed out in the book. The first one is a painting by Gustav Adolf of Sweden, and it depicts a kind of general of some kind on a horse sitting on top of a hill, and in the background you can see all these tiny little soldiers fighting the war. And of course the soldiers are irrelevant. They don't matter. They're there just to fight, just to do what they're told, basically, and fight the war. And it's the important part of this painting, or the important figure, is the man commanding the war. He is a human being, but it could be said that commander was serving out God's grand plan anyway. So it all leads to God or somebody up in the sky, or it all leads to the power of the universe in some way. Another painting that's pointed out is the Battle of White Mountain. Again, you see this great landscape with all of these tiny little soldiers and tiny little horses and stuff, and all of these battles going on in the background in the distance, and they're all depicted as tiny little ants or tiny little pawns. It's like a pawn in a game of chess. In a game of chess, the pawns are nothing. They don't really matter. It's the king and the queen that matter. And if you look at this painting, all of the soldiers are just like tiny little pawns, okay? And these were created before humanism. But then after humanism, war paintings changed in a big way. You had paintings like The War by an artist called Otto Dix. And if you look at this painting, this is all about what was happening down on the ground. This is all about individual experience. This is all about the reality and the horror of war. You don't see the war from up above, from a bird's eye view. In this painting, you're down in the dirt, you're down in the trenches, and you're experiencing the war from the individual's point of view. You see what the war was like from an individual human perspective. And that's a great shift. Another painting that's pointed out in the book is called That 2,000 Yard Stare by Tom Lear. And this is a great painting. And of course it's all about the individual again. You've got an individual soldier, you've got a close-up of his face, and he's just staring off into the distance because he's realised the sheer horror of war. And you can really see the effect that the war has had on that individual mind and that individual person. Alright, so this is a massive theme in the book. Humanism changed the world in a big way. It made human beings relevant. And also, I mean, humanism is depicted as a religion, by the way, by Yuval Noah Harari. A lot of people wouldn't see it that way. I probably wouldn't have before I read the book. But he thinks that humanism is just another religion. And just like other religions, you have different sects. So humanism formed 3 different sects. You have liberal humanism, socialist humanism, and evolutionary humanism. Now, liberal humanism is the one we all know. This particular sect gives the most relevance to the individual. We're all individuals. The individual is sacred. The individual matters, and it's all about looking after each person. Socialist humanism still thinks that the human is sacred. It still thinks that human beings are sacred, but they're sacred and relevant in a collectivist way. And basically, socialist humanism crystallizes itself in communism and socialism. If you look towards like Russia, places like Russia, and all of these communist states, like China as well, you could call that socialist humanism. Okay, so that's another one. Evolutionary humanism. This is all about the human being being sacred, but it puts a strong emphasis on evolution. Now, the most famous example of evolutionary humanism is Nazi Germany. Hitler really believed in evolution, and he really valued evolution, and he thought that some races were superior to other races, and that was fair enough because, you know, that's evolution. It's survival of the fittest. I won't go into this in too much detail, but Nazism isn't the only example of evolutionary humanism. There are other examples as well, but I just wanted to make the point here that there are 3 different sects: liberal humanism, socialist humanism, and evolutionary humanism. And the important point to take away from this is that out of all of them, out of all of 3 sects, it was liberal humanism that won. For example, the Nazis were defeated, and another example is, in the world today, you could say that democracy has beaten communism, or socialism. Democracies have beaten socialist states, and even though communism does exist today, I think that the strongest powers in the world are democracies. America is the strongest country in the world, and it's a democracy. Okay, so that rounds up section 2, humanism. Let's move on to section 3. Future technology is going to be a massive threat to humanism. Humanism values the human being and the human spirit and the human choice, but we now know that humans do not have free will. There have been lots of experiments in the recent past regarding free will. There's been a brain scanning experiment, for example, where a person had electrodes connected to his brain. Scientists could see his brain as he was thinking about things and as they asked him questions. And they discovered that the answers to his questions were known by his subconscious mind before he knew about them. They could tell that by the areas of his brain that were active. And more recent experiments have been with robo-rats, something called robo-rats. This is crazy. Scientists have actually attached electrodes to rats' brains, and then they've put on a kind of backpack onto the rat, and by stimulating certain areas of the rat's brain using electricity, they have been able to remote control rats using a handheld remote control. They can tell the rat to go left, right, forward, and they can even tell the rat to jump over things if they want it to. And of course this works on the human brain as well. The US Army, they've done this in the past, and I'm pretty sure they still do it in the present. They've experimented with things called transcranial helmets, and these are helmets that soldiers wear. They do this on army camps and on kind of testing days. They've never done this in actual battle, but they've put these helmets on soldiers, and certain areas of the brain are stimulated using electricity, and they actually stop the soldier from panicking. Quite often a soldier will panic on the battlefield when he or she sees the enemy running towards them, but wearing this helmet, certain of the areas of the brain are stimulated, and the soldier can remain completely calm, and they can become more efficient on the battlefield thanks to this helmet. All of this stuff suggests that free will doesn't exist. It suggests that we're more robotic than we like to think. And if you think about it, a simple thought experiment can kind of prove this. For example, I don't want to be a gardener. I've got no interest in gardening whatsoever. And no matter how hard I try, I can't want to be a gardener. There are things in life that I do want. I want to be an artist. I want to make videos. But I can't want to be a gardener. So that suggests that we have no free will. In this book, Yuval Noah Harari also points out quite an interesting fact, that if free will did exist, if humans had free will, or even if any animals had free will, evolution wouldn't work. For evolution to work, we have to obey our genes. We have to do what our genes want us to do. We have to be a kind of slave to our genes. So if we had this thing called free will, the whole process of evolution by natural selection just wouldn't work. So the lack of free will is a massive threat to humanism. Also, there have been other experiments that suggest that there's not even a thing as the single self. Humanism values the individual, but there might not even be an individual. There might not be a single self. And other experiments have done this, okay? So bear with me. If you suffer from epilepsy, one way to cure epilepsy is to sever the link between the two sections of the brain. Everybody has two parts of their brain, the left side and the right side. The left side deals with logic and the right side deals with creativity. If you suffer from epilepsy, sometimes doctors cut the cords that link the two sections together. So the patient is left with two separate sides of the brain that work independently. And through some clever techniques, doctors and scientists have been able to ask the two separate sections of the brain the same question. I can't explain to you exactly how they did it. It gets quite complicated, but just believe me in this. They've been able to ask both sections of the brain the same question, and they've actually got different answers before. The same human being has answered the question, but they've got different answers. That suggests that there is no single self. Okay? So if you put these two things together, no free will, no single self, what does that say for humanism? It certainly doesn't look good. And another big threat to humanism is the fact that human beings might actually become obsolete. This will be mainly due to algorithms, complex algorithms. If you're not familiar with an algorithm, it's basically a set of instructions that tell something how to do something. Computers have algorithms. Facebook uses an algorithm. YouTube uses an algorithm. It's a set of instructions. In the future, algorithms are going to get more and more complex to the point where they're actually going to know us more than we know ourselves, and they're going to be able to carry out complex tasks, and a wide range of jobs are going to become obsolete. For example, soldiers on the battlefield, like we've just been discussing. Soldiers are going to be replaced. In the future, there's going to be no need for human foot soldiers on the battlefield. Doctors will become obsolete. A complex algorithm will be able to diagnose an illness in a patient far quicker and far more efficiently than a human doctor will. A complex algorithm will know every disease ever discovered, and it will just be far more efficient at doing the job. Drivers is an obvious one. When driverless cars come into play in a few years, as they inevitably will, drivers will become obsolete. And apparently online teachers will become obsolete. You'll be able to do online courses, and your teacher will be a complex algorithm. And you may think that won't be as good as having a human teacher, but it will actually be better. A complex algorithm will know your personality traits due to your search history. It will know all about your learning preferences. And based on this vast information, it will be able to work out the best way to teach you. So even if you're a teacher, your job is still not going to be safe. And at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I'm an artist. But get this, even if you're an artist, your job will still not be safe. In the future, according to Homo Deus, even art will be dominated by complex algorithms. Sorry, I'm very hot here, I'm sweating, but I'll persevere. Even the art world will be dominated by algorithms. Now, there's an interesting example that's cited in the book of a man called David Cope, who's a musicologist. David Cope developed a complex algorithm that was able to compose symphonies, an algorithm that was able to make music. And he went into this huge theatre and he played this music to a large audience of classical music connoisseurs, and they were completely fooled. They had no idea that the music was created by a computer. Okay? And when they were told, by the way, they were not happy. They didn't go down well at all. And then he did another experiment. He actually went into a theatre and he told people, I'm going to play one piece of music by a computer and one piece that was made by a human. You've got to tell the difference. And they heard the music and they actually voted wrong. Okay, so it's quite scary in a way. An algorithm can make a piece of music that sounds as emotional and as beautiful as a human being. That was proven by David Cope. So Even the art world is going to be dominated by algorithms. We're all familiar with things called like Siri. You might speak to Siri on your smartphone. Algorithms like Siri are going to get more and more complex and clever as time goes on. We all put all of our information online anyway. Facebook knows what we like, Google knows what we like, and over time algorithms like Siri are going to start making decisions for us, and I mean serious decisions. For example, in the future, an algorithm on your phone will be able to choose what partner you should marry based on all of the information that it knows about you. It will be able to choose a life partner for you, perhaps better than you can do yourself. An algorithm will be able to choose a career path for you. How many times have you ever heard somebody say, I just don't know what to do in life, I don't know what job to do? Or certainly when people are younger, they're like that. People say, when I was younger, I didn't know what subject to study. I didn't know what job to do. I didn't know what career was right for me. Well, in the future, you could ask an algorithm. You're going to be able to ask an algorithm, what job should I do? What subject should I study? And the algorithm will be able to tell you the best subject or the best job that you will be happy with. And it will actually know the answer better than you will. Another thing is voting. A complex algorithm will know which political party will be best suited for you on voting day. Alright, so it's all about algorithms becoming more complex, and the simple fact that we have no free will, and there might not even be a thing called a single self. This is all a massive threat to humanism. Okay, so that rounds up part 3. Let's move on to part 4. The book finishes off talking about future religions. Yuval Noah Harari likes to describe certain things as religions, and in his point of view, the future is going to be dominated by 2 new religions. The first one is techno-humanism. Now this is another kind of branch of humanism, and the other one is called dataism. Let's start with techno-humanism. So techno-humanism will be all about upgrading humans and kind of modifying humans. I suppose you could say transhumanism is a techno-humanist religion. So the first thing that he notes is that we're going to try to achieve different states of consciousness. As human beings, we experience the world through our level of consciousness, through our brains, and it's sometimes very easy to forget that this is not the only way to experience the world. The way we see the world is just one of countless possible ways. And for example, if you look towards the animal kingdom, different animals have got different levels of consciousness, and they've got different types of consciousness. The specific examples in the book are bats and whales. Bats are an especially good example. Bats use sonar to navigate their way across the world. I don't know whether they're completely blind, but they definitely don't see the world the same way as we do. So they use sonar. So a bat sends out kind of auditory signals, and they kind of wait for that signal to bounce off of a wall of a cave, for example, and then they time to see how long that signal takes to come back. It's a form of echolocation. A bat must see the world in a radically different way to a human being, and that's a good example. You know, we don't have to see the world through our plane of consciousness, and through the use of gene editing, for example, or maybe even new drugs that have not been developed yet, we might experience and see the world in a radically different way in the future. We probably can't even imagine what it will be like, but that's what a techno-humanist religion will aim towards, a new state of consciousness. But again, like the other humanist religions, the techno-humanist religions will face a dilemma or a crisis, because as a humanist religion, it holds human beings to be sacred. But if we start modifying ourselves and changing ourselves beyond recognition, that will mean that humans aren't sacred. We will have changed. So techno-humanist religions may fall like the other humanist religions. But the other one is dataism. Now this is more extreme. You could say this is more extreme. Dataism sees everything on Earth as a kind of data processing system. And the whole entire meaning of the universe, according to a dataist, I suppose you'd call them, is to have as much data flowing through the universe as possible. It's all about free-flowing data. That's what dataism is all about. You may have heard of somebody called Ray Kurzweil. He's like, I don't know what his degree is, but he speculates about the future a lot, and he published a book called The Singularity is Near. I think Ray Kurzweil believes in dataism. So everything is like a data processing system. The two examples, or the two main examples that are used in the book, are capitalism and communism. Capitalism could be seen as a decentralized data processing system. So nobody's in control of capitalism. It controls itself, but still it kind of gathers data about the economy. It processes that data and it comes up with prices for things. You have a going rate for the price of milk, but nobody really decides the price of milk. Nobody sits around the table and decides what a pint of milk should be or how much it should cost. Capitalism does that on its own, so it could be seen as a kind of huge data processing system, whereas communism, on the other hand, it is a processing system, but it's centralized. People actually do sit around the table and work out figures and decide what things should be. And dataism, it believes that information should be free, freedom of information, and everything should be recorded, uploaded and shared according to the dataist view. So basically the way that we've started to live today, everybody takes selfies, everybody takes photos of themselves every day and videos, and everybody uploads them onto the internet, and then everybody shares them online. This is completely in line with dataism. This is how it should be. An experience is worthless if it's not recorded, uploaded and shared according to the dataist view. And this is going to expand and proliferate as the years go by. Everything's going to be online, more and more data, and it will all be free to use. According to dataism, humans aren't sacred, data is. That's the big difference between techno-humanism and dataism. With all of the humanist religions, human beings are sacred, but with dataism, data is the thing that is sacred. So, I mean, according to dataism, we're inferior to data. We are less important than data, and it's also mentioned in the book that kind of, according to dataism and its worldview, human beings could one day be uploaded to microchips, and then from microchips we could be uploaded to data, and then from data we could just kind of dilute and kind of fall into the huge stream of data across the universe and just join up with the big data flow of the universe, and that will be the fate of human beings. Okay, so the book actually ends on quite a scary note, in my opinion. The last final message of the book is that ultimately human beings will become less and less important, and data will become more and more important. So, but on the other hand, it is mentioned that there's no way to accurately predict the future. Yuval quite openly states that nobody knows for certain what is going to happen in the future. So dataism is basically a theory of what might happen. In my opinion, I think it's more likely that the techno-humanist religions will come to fruition. I mean, we already upgrade humans as it is. We have hearing aids, for example. If you go blind, you can have a kind of a chip put in your eye to make you see better. We have pacemakers and stuff. We already upgrade humans, so techno-humanism has already come into force. So there you go. That's Homo Deus. That's the main points all covered. It's an amazing book. It is an amazing book. I had a great time reading it. Parts were quite difficult to get through, but on the whole, it is a very good read. My main criticism of Homo Deus is that the front cover is quite misleading. When you look at the front cover, you see this kind of digital fingerprint, and you get the impression that the whole book is going to be about the future. You think you're going to be reading about future inventions and future technology non-stop, but in actual fact, apart from the first opening pages, I would say that about the first 60% of the book is about the past. You'll find yourself reading about ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia, a lot more about the future. It's only in the last third of the book that it really gets into the future. So that's my main criticism of the book. However, I do think it's a good read, and I would actually go as far as saying that it's better than Sapiens, which is Yuval's first book, and that's quite a bold claim. So there's tons more stuff in the book as well. This has been quite an in-depth review, but if you actually go out and read the book for yourself, there's loads more information in there that I couldn't possibly cover in one video. It'd be too long. So if you enjoyed this video, you'll still enjoy reading the book. So I recommend going out there, buying it and reading it. Okay, so thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back probably in about another 2 weeks or so with another video. In the meantime, try to have a great day on this weird, scary, peculiar rock we call Earth. Goodbye.